I'll then start the session now. Can everyone hear me? Just type a yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I'll start the session now. So what we'll do during the session is we'll talk about the career in data science, like what exactly when we say that a data science role, there's a lot of hype about data science, right? Like a lot of salary in the domain and a lot of people trying to enter into the domain, like especially the freshers and someone from even the IT domain trying to switch to data science. But the first question people should understand, like what exactly a data science role is, what is the future of it, and why there is a sudden such demand of that role, right? So we'll try to understand these things, like what exactly the skills are needed, and what are different categories of role in a data science domain. So basically, there is a data team, right? Like if just like there is an engineering team working in a company and any product team, there's a data team also working in product companies. So and this data team is also divided into certain categories. Like data science is kind of divided into certain categories. It would be, I'll talk about it, like data analysts, machine learning engineers. So we'll talk about what exactly those roles are, what exactly the skills needed for those roles are, what is the seniority level of those roles, and what is the complexity. Like if as a fresher you are entering into the domain, what exactly do you need to learn? How much time does it take to learn those things? So we'll talk about those things. And since I'll give you a brief description about myself also, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. Okay. So my name is Rehan Asif. So, and I'm the co-founder of OneLearn.io. We'll talk about what that is at the end of the session. So I have a 9 years of experience in leading data science team, and I'm a IIT Guwahati alumni. Previously, what my experiences have been in, like as an assistant general manager of data science in Renew Power, head of data science in Waze.ai, principal data scientist at Intertrust, data science at RE Current Energy. I've also invested in currently advisor at Bhasha.io, which is an Indian language learning app. Like if you want to learn any Kannada or Tamil or any Indian languages, you can go and try it out. Bhasha.io, very beautiful app and trendy dice. I've also built floating space in the past, which was like in 2016. It was kind of an aggregator of spaces, like all empty spaces. Like in a cafe, you have empty spaces. So it's kind of an aggregator which anybody else can use for. Okay. And during my career in data science, I worked in different domains. Like as you can see, Renew Power, one of it. But not only Renew Power, the e-commerce companies, like location-based intelligence, the marketing data, the ad tech industries. So I've worked in a multiple domains throughout my 9 years career, right? And build the team around it, like even the data engineering team, the data science team, the deep learning team, the deployment team. We'll talk about what these exactly mean. But I've worked in those areas. So, and I'll talk about like how to reach to a certain extent level. Like when you start as a data analyst, how do you move from a data analyst to a data science role, from a data science role to a lead data science role? We'll talk about those. Okay. So now coming to the agenda of today's session, what we are going to cover, the first topic we are going to cover is like data as a mode. Like, and the second topic is roles in a data team and skills for each role. Third is roadmap to learn data science. The fourth is I'll talk about OneLearn and what exactly it is about. Okay. And in the meanwhile, I've also put up the tab of ask your questions here. You can see that on the screen. Just click on it and whatever questions you have, that just start putting it out, and we'll try to cover it in during the session only. Okay. So the first topic, yeah, data as a mode. So I'll talk about the product evolution. Like, see, 20 years before, like even 20, more than 20 years before, like 30 years before, 40 years before, what used to happen, right? Most of the tasks which you're doing right now was used to be done manually, right? Like suppose you want to book a train ticket or something. What do you used to do? You used to go to a train station, go to the ticket counter, and used to book the ticket. That was the process. Or you would call someone and ask for the help, like, brother, can you go and book a ticket for me? That was the process which we used to, and we have seen in our like young age, we have seen that happening. like these process happening. Like most of the tickets, train tickets, were booked manually, right? Going to the counter and we will be there getting the ticket. But what happened, like in the last 20 years or like the 2000s, that decade and the 1990s late decade, software erupted as a big tech revolution. What basically that means is like software started eating a lot of product companies, which basically means like the tasks which we're doing manually, the software make it easy for the user to do those tasks, either automating those tasks, like me trying to book a ticket while going to a ticket station and then trying to book a ticket used to be just on my laptop. Like that time maybe a desktop or something, I can go on desktop and log into a website and then book a ticket. So that's what software did. Instead of me doing tasks, a lot of things manually, software tried to do those manual tasks into like a interface. It gave an interface to a user and it connected to the backend system, like here in this case ticket booking system, right? So software automated those manual processes for us, make the user experiences very easy. But what is happening right now, right? The last decade was all about, the 2000 decade was all about software. People did a lot of things on software, started it, people get used to it. Like nobody, nobody gave a think about it. Like even why is it going to be so difficult about booking a ticket? It's so easy. Like I know IRCTC, you could log in and you start booking a ticket. But 20 years back, that was a cumbersome process. But what is happening right now is like AI is coming into the picture. What is AI is doing right now? AI is the first is like what we call as product with inbuilt AI. That is, AI is built inside the product. Like suppose you are developing a Netflix recommendation engine, which you have seen. Like if you have used like a Netflix recommendation, they would recommend you something like this is these genre movies or these particular movie titles are good for you to watch. But Netflix is not a totally a AI company, right? It's a content company. It shows you movies to watch. That's what you come on Netflix for, to watch movies. But what Netflix is doing, like they're using AI inside their product and making a user experience much better. Right now, you are addicted to Netflix just because the content it recommends to you is so perfect for you. Like it feels like they understand your personality, like what you like, what you dislike. So that is what AI is doing right now in most of the products. That they are making the user experience much better, so that you don't switch to another product. Like if somebody else launches another product competing to Netflix, like it's very difficult for me to switch into that. Like I know my like Netflix knows my preferences much better. Like even like taking another person's account, like if I'm logged in with my own account on Netflix, I wouldn't like to log in with someone else's account on Netflix, just for the purpose like Netflix understands so much better of my preferences that it will recommend me much better recommendations of the movies I should watch. So that is the beauty what AI is bringing here. Like the user experience in the product is becoming much richer than what software is. Think about it. Like if Netflix was just relying on the software part without going into like AI part, you would just be manually watching those movies. Like you don't know, there is no recommendation into the system. There is no intelligence in the system. Netflix would never understand my preferences. So that's what the AI came in and top and start building those personalization for me, right? But the fourth and biggest revolution, which is going to happen, it has started happening, and I think most of the common users might not have used it. But what is becoming is like most of the products are now being built into the direction of AI first product. What basically that means is like AI is making the product more beautiful, right? Like not just that we have inbuilt AI into the product, but AI first product basically means like something like if you see copy.ai, if you heard about GTP3, like what they're exactly doing, they are writing stories like the news articles you read, they're generating news articles automatically without getting any input from the human being. Like think about these products. Like they're generating human faces, random human faces which doesn't exactly exist. And they're generating those images which the human doesn't exist, but they're generating faces of that human, some non-existing being faces. And you can use those faces in your advertisement or something like that. There are companies in Chennai, in India, which is developing those like the fashion models which you see on Myntra or something. They're developing it through computer models from AI. And those fashion models, like seen from the cost cutting from Myntra point of view, right? Myntra has to spend a lot of money on video production. But these AI first products will directly generate those AI models, directly generate those videos wearing the products which Myntra wants to have a video shoot of. Right? So that is AI first product. And this is the next decade is going to be just about this. Like more and more products will be moving in the direction of AI first, right? And you see the beauty of it, right? Like most of the AI products has much and much more higher authority or higher preferences over the software, just the software products, like because it saves times, it saves money, it saves efforts, and people love it. That's the point. Like without making much an effort, right? People love it. That is the whole point of AI first product. Okay, the effort which people used to do early has been reduced significantly. That is what AI is doing. Okay, and that is what the product evolution is happening, like from manual to software to inbuilt AI to AI first products. So no, earlier, just as we saw right now, we talked about automating the process, right? Like as software used to do. Most of the user interaction, like what we used to do manually, software helped a lot in terms of reducing that friction of the manual task. But and earlier that used to be the advantage. Like if I started any company in the 2002 or 2003, the best software team would give me the more advantage in the with my competitor, right? The best UI, the best design of the website. That is what the advantage was at that time, right? But what is happening right now, the data has become much more important than the software used to be. It's like the decade is repeating, but now instead of software, it's the data. Software is still important, but what has happened that software has become everyone is using that software part, right? Like there is no USP for me as a company. If I've started a company and there's another company like A and ABC, that company is also developing the same software. I am also developing the same software. So there is no competing advantage or difference between both of them, right? It is the data and it is the AI which is bringing those kind of advantages into that particular product. And what kind of those advantages are? Some advantages like operational advantage. The second advantage are like strategic advantage. The third advantage are like driving core product. Fourth advantage are like new opportunities. And I'll talk about this in detail. Like, what do you mean by operational advantage, right? So if I build a website, right, and I'm doing a lot of marketing for people to reach to my website, right? So the data is being collected from that point, like what particular advertising I'm putting it out in the market, which people are seeing that advertising, are they coming into my website or not, are they buying products on my website or not. So these kind of data are being collected right now, and when I want to know what action should I take, should I increase the stock of any particular product or not, so how will I decide that? I'll decide not just based on my software, right? Like that I have a beautiful, like I have a beautiful design. It is a data which is going to help me to decide like what quantity of product should I keep into that inventory, right? I'll just go and ask my someone who's analyzing the data set. Just going to ask what is the forecast for that particular product, like how many product is that going to be sold in the next 1 week or next 1 month, so that I go and buy my inventory. Right? It is totally the data which is giving me that advantage, right? Like if people are not coming to my website, I'll go and look at the data, like why the people are not coming. Was there some any holiday, was there some any competing product which have launched at a lower price? So these kind of answers which I need to run my company, right? These all answers will come from the data. Someone who has to sit at the back end and analyze those data set to answer these questions as a business, for a business owner like me. Like they have to come with some answers for me, like why there is a drop in people clicking on my websites, why some of the like advertising metrics, like how I'm putting some Insta ads, some Facebook ads, but why people are not clicking on it. So someone has to do those analysis, right? And the software alone can't do that. It's the data which is being stored, like the metrics which is being stored. These are going to give you those answers, right? Even a strategic advantage, like someone say Walmart wants to open a new store, or say Reliance Fresh wants to open a new store in a new city. They need to analyze like which exact location do I need to open on. Will it be going to be the like main bazaar, or will it be going to some other locations? So that also depends on data, right? Like how many people, what is the traffic volume that goes around, what is the like the location which which you want to open, what is the like income capacity of the people which lives around there, like who has the potential to come there, what is the purchasing power of those people. Like you'll analyze, you'll crunch those data set to answer like, okay, Reliance Fresh, I don't think so you should open in that particular market. I think that you should open in this particular market because analyzing the land amount, analyzing the people traffic flow, analyzing the food fall, analyzing all the amenities which is around that land area, I'm suggesting you to open this particular location, right? Software is just a tool now, right, to analyze those data set, but it is the data which is giving me that advantage to the company. If I didn't have the data, so suppose if I didn't have the traffic information, if I didn't have the information of all the amenities around that overall cities, like at which location, what are the amenities, my answer would be a pretty guesstimate, right? Like I would be guessing it out. And investing hundreds of crores of rupees just on the basis of guess is like pretty bad decision. I'm not a good consultant. I'm not a good business manager at that time. Like if I'm just taking a guess and investing hundreds and crores of rupees, like, right? So you need to have the why part of it. Why are you doing that particular task, right? You need to crunch to some data set, get it out some data set, and then try to build it out, right? And the third part, right, like driving core product. Like if you have used Gmail, right? If you have used Gmail, and you will see like in the current version of the Gmail, you'll see like if you write some text, it tries to autocomplete it, right? So that gives me a fraction advantage, right? Like if I'm using Outlook and Outlook didn't have this feature, but Gmail has this feature, right? So Gmail building those features is just based on data. What they have done, they have analyzed old historical data set. Like when I type hi, then I type the name of the person which I'm sending to the email. So it directly will tell you the name, right? When I'm ending the mail, I will write thanks and regards. Then it directly will tell you that you should write your own name at the end. So these things, it has analyzed over a lot of data set which people used to send emails and emails. And what Google has done, they have gone through all the emails and they have analyzed. Like if you write a particular set of text, what is the probability that you are going to write that particular set of text after it? And then it recommends you. It tries to autocomplete. And when people actually use that, then what Google is doing, they are taking it as a feedback, right? That my data product, which I built using some data set of historical information of those emails, those Gmail autocomplete feature is actually working out, right? Similar thing like Uber's or Ola's demand and supply thing. Like you see the price variation, like every minute, every seconds, every few hours, you'll see the price variation, and every location you will see the price variation. How they are doing it? They're utilizing the data set, like what is the demand at this particular time, what is the supply of drivers at this particular snap of time, at what location, and based on that they're crunching the numbers and they're deciding the price. Like, okay, this is the amount of price I should charge for that particular distance, because at that particular time, if it's a night time, the price would be different. If it's a daytime, the price would be different. Like if it's a congested area, traffic area, the price would be little high. If it's a very secluded place, then the price might not be that high. If you're going to an airport, the price would be very different. So these all numbers, there is no single logic which is built. It's kind of data crunching. Like data is automatically predicting something. Like this should be your price based on whatever scenarios. Like we call it features in machine learning terms, but whatever scenario information you have, whatever the other information you have about the situation, like the time, the location, the distance, based on that you're crunching those numbers. Whatever the demand you have, like the number of people asking for a ride, and whatever the supply you have, if you have less number of drivers but a large number of people requesting for the drive, you might charge high, because most likely then the supply demand gap would be completed, right? So that's because the demand is more than the supply, so you might charge more high, right? So these kind of is very dynamic pricing thing, and this situation can't be very like manual entered, or someone at the end of software is entering like manually, some human being is sitting at back and entering one and one. It can't be possible like that, right? So it is a data set which Uber or Ola has observed in the past, like what people are ready to pay, what and at what time, what should be the price. So based on that, they have crunched some numbers, and that is what they're showing it to you, right? And some new opportunities, like this data set has created some new opportunities for some companies also, like Netflix. What they're doing is like they're creating contents now. What kind of contents? Just contents based on like they have seen like user past history, what people are most likely to complete as a movie, what kind of, if they see that 50% of their people are watching documentaries of that particular genre, they would try to create those documentaries, right? They would invest more money into that, creating more documentaries, because they know that people would like to watch those kind of documentaries. And if they know that people have the affinity to watch those particular set of documentaries, most people will retain their subscription, because at the end Netflix wants people to retain their subscription, right? So that is what they are going to do. They are analyzing the data set of what particular movies they're watching, and that is what the content they're building. Now think if these companies which I have talked about till now, they didn't have those data access. So if they didn't have this, they couldn't have built those strategical advantage they had. No, like creating more contents, those supply demand feature of that Uber pricing, dynamic pricing. They couldn't have built that. If they couldn't have built that, there is no difference between someone launching now. Like if I go and start try to build some taxi company right now, there is no advantage Uber would have apart from the money factor. Like they would be hugely funded apart from the marketing and everything. They don't have any other advantage. Is the advantage of data which is keeping them ahead of other companies, right? Like what people like, what people, where generally should I ask my drivers to be there at that particular time because there would be a higher demand coming from at that location at that time. So these things are helping Uber to compete and stay ahead with other companies, right? If I launched right now, I would be burning my money, but I wouldn't have that data advantage which Uber has, right? So you get the idea, right? Like how software earlier, what software use was an advantage for a lot of company. Now data has become those as an advantage for these companies. Right? Just a e-commerce explanation also, right? Like in the first step, you see that how do you come to an e-commerce website, right? Like you see some of the advertisement, right? You see the advertisement, you go to the website, you search for a particular product, and the one which you like, you purchase it, and then you have some queries like if you don't like if you're not getting it on time or something, like you go ahead and ask some queries on the customer support, then you usually get some order, then you go and provide some feedback. Like this is generally a process of how your interaction with the e-commerce website happens. So think how many AI you have seen in this, right? Like just seeing the ad, like why was the ad visible to you? That is also a question, right? Like they're not bombarding the same ad to everyone, right? Otherwise it would be a wastage of money, right? TV used to have that bombardment, like same ad would you will see, everyone will be seeing the same ad in the TV era. But what is happening in the social and digital age, like you're seeing the only those ads which is relevant to you. Like if you're a male of age group 30, you would not be seeing women dresses as ads. Otherwise it would be a wastage of money, right? Because someone who's advertising is paying some dollars, right? And they don't want to pay those dollars and show the ads to someone who is not their targeted audience, right? Because if you're a 30-year male, you're not a targeted audience of a women dress, right? So that is the first step. They analyze a user persona, and based on that, they personalize those ads. That is where data sets and AI is being used, like machine learning is used. The other thing is like when you visit a website, right? If you visit a website, you'll see a product and then you will start seeing similar products. Like if you had bought this particular product, there are 5 other similar products which user has bought. This is also coming from data, right? Otherwise, it would have been random, right? If they don't have this information, like if I bought a speaker, I'm also interested in some other products, like some digital products or something like that, because they have seen like the 10,000 past users who has visited and bought this particular set of speaker. They were also bought in the next week these kind of products. They have seen that in the past. So that is these kind of data. They're crunching it and creating like the suggestions for me. Like I'm also buying this particular speaker, so it's a very likelihood that I will also behave like similarly to those 10,000 users in the past, right? So that is why it is recommending me those particular set of products. So that is where also data and AI is playing a role, right? And then you go ahead and bought a product, right? While even purchasing, you'll see that there are 10 other payment options, but you will see that the payment option which you regularly use will come at the top, right? Because what these e-commerce websites wants to do, like they want to remove the friction like in the user experience. So they don't want to show you 10 saved cards or something like that. They only want to show the one which you have been using again and again. So that will come on the top. So that also comes from the data point of view. Like that data is telling that software engineers or someone who's developing those websites that these is the payment gateway that this particular user generally uses, right? The other part is like the query resolution, right? So and if you have used most of the websites right now, there would be chatbots, and there isn't even an agent sitting at the back. Like you will just put your query and they would directly keep you answering those queries automated fashion, right? many times. Like even if you're using Swiggy, Zomato, it's almost a similar scenario, right? So this is where also data is also playing a role, right? That they have seen past and past conversation. Because if you have in the early days, if you go to Swiggy, they didn't have this kind of AI based chatbot. It's over the time they have built this kind of functionality. Why? Because they used to collect those data set, like what user are chatting over, what is the agent, the customer agent is replying to that, and based on those interaction, they have created a bot which is almost 90% accurately answering the queries for those particular user questions, right? So again, the order gets delivered to the user, then user provides the feedback on the website. And if you have seen Flipkart feedbacks, they extract information from that and tries to put a number on it. Like suppose if you're using a smartphone, you'll see that in the Flipkart at the bottom there is option like that 4.5 rating on the batteries, 3.9 rating on the display. So these all comes from the data set, right? Whatever the feedback the user is providing, they crunch those feedbacks and then provide a score to you, right? So that enough, I don't have to read all those reviews first. I'll directly go ahead and see those particular scores which Flipkart has crunched and given to me directly. So what it is doing, right? It is removing the user friction. Like I don't want to waste my time going through like hundred of reviews. So that is what Flipkart is helping me to do. Like making my decision faster, whether I should go ahead and look deeper into this smartphone or not. If the battery rating is like 2.5, I wouldn't waste my time reading all the reviews. I would just move to another smartphone. Okay. So this section was just to give an idea, like why data has become such an important part and why there's a hype about this data set. Why? Because it's until whenever, because I have heard a lot of time people come and ask me this question, like, will the data analyst job exist like 10 years later down? Will the data science job exist after 10 years? See, unless business is there, like if a business transaction is happening, someone is doing some marketing, someone is doing this business, data is always going to play a role. And over the time, it is going to play a much bigger role than what it is doing, right? Because a lot of AI first product will come into the picture, a lot of data. Right now, like 10 years before, we didn't used to consume the amount of data which we are consuming right now. So these, whatever the amount of data which we are consuming is being recorded somewhere. Facebook is recording whatever interaction you're doing on the website. Instagram is recording whatever the interaction you're doing on the website. And you're using hundreds of apps, like in a month or something, hundreds of websites you're using. So everything is connecting some data set and they want to build something out of it, right? Your smartphone is collecting all the GPS data set and they build some user persona, like this person visits at this location and stays at that amount of time. This person installs this particular app. So if he's installing a lot of Nike apps or Run app, he's particularly interested in like sports or something. So they create a user persona of yours, right? So just wanted to give you an idea like how data is an integral part of any company, and nobody can win without thinking and bringing data as a core philosophy. Okay. So if you have any questions to know, you can put it out in the same ask your question section. And I hope everything is going right in this, because I'm also using this software for the first time. Yeah. Yeah. So coming back to the roles and skills, right now we talked about like what data plays a role, like why data is such important for any company. And and obviously if there is a data now, there is a data team which is working, right? But data team is not a single person or 2 to 3% doing the same exact job everywhere. It's a team of which is performing, each person will, or each group of small people will performing a specific role, and that requires a certain skill, right? And we'll talk about that right now. Hey, suppose I'll give an example and we'll try to go through that example and then try to understand what job basically is for each role, right? So suppose if you have used Google Photos app, right? Yeah, earlier it didn't have that feature, but right now it has those features, right? Like if you type cat, it will automatically show only the cat images to you. If you type like any mountains, it will only show mountains in your Photos app. I'm talking about Photos app. I'm not talking about Google search, because Google search was online, right? but it's in your own photos, like whatever the photos you have clicked using your camera, these kind of search functionalities started coming out, right? Because they're understanding from your own photos which you have saved in your mobile phone, they're understanding like if you are typing cat, these are the images which are cat. So there is some algorithm, right? Something is happening which is able to identify all the images in your phone as cat, right? So that was suppose we hypothetically know Google's wants to add this feature. Like suppose it didn't have this feature and that they want to add this feature, right? So there is a team which is going to work on that, right? The first team would be a manager or PM, right? And what would be their call? Like, if suppose in a board meeting we had and we decided, like, someone told us, I was the product manager, and someone told us to me as a product manager or a manager, like, I think you should build this feature into the Google Photos app. Okay, this is a very ad hoc request. So my first question would be, is this feature that is important to the user? Is it actually an important problem to solve in the product at all? Like, are my users going to use this feature or not? If I'm going to spend a lot of time, right? Because I'm going to spend a lot of resources on building those features. I need to understand like whether my users are going to use it or not. Unless otherwise, what will happen is like I would spend month and month to build those features, but if no one is going to use it, it's a waste of time, right? So what I will do, I'll go to a data analyst. I'll talk about what data analyst does, but think of it like there is a person whose job is called data analyst. His role is that, and I will go to him. The manager will go to him and ask him, "Can you analyze some data set which we have collected?" Because Google is already collecting a lot of data set, and can you analyze and see that do people actually search for these kind of things and try to find answers for this? And basically, which means like, can you see and see historical search term? Do people go and try to search for cat and expect cat results comes, or try to find some particular images and they have to scroll again and again to a long time to reach a particular image? Like if you have 10,000 images, they would have to scroll a lot and lot because nobody remember the dates they have clicked the pics, right? If I want to find a cat pic, my old cat pic, right, of 2 years back, I have to scroll a lot and lot and then find it out. Can you, I'll go to a data analyst now and I will ask him this question. Can you go and analyze those data set and see if there's, and can you come with some insights to me, right? And see if the hypothesis, I am having a hypothesis here, right? Like, which basically there is some question as a manager in my mind and I want the answers to that question. And there is no way someone is going to give me the answer without crunching the data set, right? So the first thing I'll do is I'll not go to any machine learning engineer. I'll not go to any deep learning engineer. I'll go to the data analyst whose job is to analyze the data set and get some insights out of it, right? So what he'll do is he'll go and analyze those Google search terms and queries and images and see how people used to behave in the past. And he'll come back to and show me a result that this is the interpretation of the data set which I analyzed, which was saved in some databases. Went ahead and analyzed those data sets, and this is the interpretation of those results. And I think people is having those problems, or he'll come and say people doesn't have that problem. Like he'll try to get some answers and come to me based on the data set he has analyzed, right? So like at a higher level, that is what a job of data analyst generally is. Like someone comes with generally a question, like either a manager would come with some question, or even data analyst is expected to come up with their own questions, right? Think of some questions on their own, like because they understand the business, because they've been working in that business for a long time. They are expected, they're dealing with the data at a very granular level. They're expected to come up with some of their own questions. And what the data analysts then do is like they go and deep dive into the data set. Either the data set can be on the Excel file or can be terabytes of data set. Then they have to write some code, like in a either Python programming language or some Scala programming language, and then they go ahead and analyze those data set, either using some data frame called some other tool or some SQL language. They would go ahead and analyze those tools, and then they would try to interpret those results, right? And then they showcase those results to someone as a management or some other colleagues, either in the form of dashboard, right? Either in form of some MIS reports or some PPTs. That is what their job is generally, like getting insights from the data set, because a lot of business answers depend on that, right? And even if you want to do something, develop these features, right? Unless and until I feel there is as a PM or as a manager, unless and until I feel there is a need for that particular feature, I will not spend other resources. Other resources basically means like other people in the company into that particular feature, right? So I need to have surety, and that is what data analyst generally gives, and that is what the role is generally is like to analyze those data set, get some insights about it, interpret the results, and then show it to their colleagues in management, either in the form of dashboard or something like which is presentable, right? Now, the role of data scientist comes. Like once the insight is generated and the feature looks meaningful to develop, right? They have come to the conclusion, like the data analyst and product manager saw the report and they realize, okay, yeah, this is one of the feature I believe that will solve a lot of problem for my users. That is if I develop a some kind of model where if I type the particular term and only those term images would come as a Google app result, right? Like photos result. So I went as a manager, I would go to a data scientist and I said, okay, and this is a data analyst, they have done this kind of analysis and they realize that this product will have. Now you please go ahead and you can develop a model, right? So what is a model now, right? So data science test generally works with the data, like and they have a hypothesis that this model will work. Of course, there can be scenarios when the model will not work. Like it's kind of experimentation for them also. So what data scientists generally do, they use the data to predict something. Like in this case, what is the prediction? Like based on a search term, they are predicting like these are the images which are similar to that search term. Like if I've written cat, then these are the set of images which is similar to cat. And if I've written books, these are the set of images which is similar to book. So they're predicting that, right? So that is what a data scientist's job is. After the conclusion has been done that we have to develop, we again go, data scientists will go and look at the data set. They will again analyze the data set. And again, they would do the programming at their end, analyze the data set. And but the difference between a data analyst and data scientist is like a data scientist knows machine learning algorithms. And these algorithms can be prediction model, can be computer vision model, like identifying an object or something like that. They know this skills, like they understand machine learning algorithms, and that is what their job is. Like they develop this machine learning algorithms to build for that predictions, right? Like in this case, are matching a search term to the images, and then their job is to evaluate the accuracy of that predictions, right? Because at the end they have to deliver a good accuracy, and if there is no accuracy, not a good accuracy, like suppose in the initial version of the machine learning algorithm which they have implemented, they got accuracy of 80%. So now their job is to improve those accuracy, either by applying a different machine learning algorithm or maybe using more and more data set. So when you go and deep dive into like algorithms, machine learning algorithms, you realize that how evaluation generally works, how people iterate on machine learning models over the time, right? But that is what a data science job is now. Like getting the data set, building those, using the ML algorithms which they know, and then build models for prediction, evaluate the accuracy of their predictions, and keep on working on improving the model, right? So this is the role of data scientists. Now, once they have done their task, like they come back to the manager and say, okay, I built a model and this is the algorithm which I used, and they're giving a very good accuracy after a lot of iteration, after playing with a lot of experimentation. This has been my conclusion. Okay. So the next job, sorry, yeah, I missed one point. So the data set which you're going to work with, like the data scientist or data analyst are going to work with, someone has to provide those data set into a database, right? Like the search query or the images which your phone was storing, someone has to retrieve that information from your phone and store into a database so that my data analyst or data scientist can use those data set, right? Because it's not a job of data scientist and data analyst to retrieve the data which is existing in a third party, like in this case, phone of a user, right? So that is generally a role of a data engineer. Like, so data engineer transforms raw data to a useful format that can be used by data analyst or scientist, which basically means in our scenario, they would be retrieving those images and search terms and storing into a database format, like any format which has been asked by my and decided by my data analyst and scientist that this is a format which we prefer to analyze, to do some algorithm and build some algorithm or model on top of it. So that is a job of a data engineer, right? So data engineer generally will work on three things, like data ingestion. They will transform those data set in the format which data analyst or data scientist is working, and then they would store it somewhere, like store, because they have to store it for a long time. Like sometimes data scientists would use it like in near real time. Sometimes it is being used at a very later time. So they have to store it somewhere after doing some of the transformation, which has been agreed beforehand by the data analysts, scientists, product managers, everyone. Like this is the format I want to store the data set in, right? Like in the case of images, I may not be wanting to store the raw images. I may be wanting to convert into the pixel arrays, like the pixel values of those, and that is what I want to store, right? Because that is what is going to be used by a data analyst or scientist, right? So that is a transformation area, the data engineer generally does, right? So we talked about three roles: data engineer, data science, scientist, and data analyst. Now, this is an ML engineer, right? So a scientist has developed a model. Now the point is, if the accuracy is good, someone has to deploy the model in your ecosystem, and the user has to use it. So making the model which a data scientist has developed into a live model, which basically means putting into production. That is what I mean by making it live, so that any real users can access it. So that is generally a job of machine learning engineer, and to take care of like the scalability of it. Like suppose a data scientist would work on a smaller data set, and maybe they would test the model on a very smaller data set. But it's the job of machine learning engineer to scale those models, to actually work with the servers, by make sure the server resources are that much so that it can scale it to say million users or 10 million, 100 million users. So that's generally a job of machine learning engineer, right? So learning engineers take whatever data scientists build and help them scale it up. They also ensure that the service is maintainable and that the team follows the best engineering practices, right? It's more of a software engineering and data science work, right? Their focus is more on engineering than on modeling. So machine learning will work on three things, right? Scaling the prediction infrastructure, maintaining AI in server infrastructure, and creating web services for the model, like how the users are going to consume it, or users app is going to consume it, right? So these are 4 or 5 roles I've talked about, but then there are also other roles which I have not written here, which are some like AI researcher, machine learning researcher. So they generally comes in a domain of like actually researching or building new algorithms, right, reading new papers which is being published in like in the research domain, and then using those published research in the company, and then asking the data science team to build models on it, or they're developing new algorithms and building the model on top of it. So these AI researchers generally not a lot of company has. It's mostly the bigger companies like Flipkart, Amazon, Uber. These companies would have, but someone of a mid-level company generally don't go with a researcher, because most of the job doesn't require a lot of research. It's someone who's working on that scale with that amount of data set generally needs researchers. Right. So to summarize it, we have product managers make sure that the team is building the right thing, act as a gateway to all the requests, and speak on behalf of the users. Data analysts analyze data, define key metrics, and create dashboards. Data scientists build models and incorporate them into the product. Data engineers prepare the data for analysts and data scientists. ML engineers productionize, which basically means making it live. Machine learning services, and establish the best engineering practices. Clear? Now, we'll talk about roadmap to data science, like what exactly we need to learn to build this, and what exactly as a fresher should we target, right? Someone who's wanting to switch to data science, what should they be targeting, right? So, any questions or something if you have? I hope you're adding all the questions. Yeah. Yeah. So now we'll talk about roadmap to data science. Right? So uh, we talk about different learning stages, right? So the higher we go to the top, the complexity increases, right? So the least complex skills which is required is of a data analyst and data engineering. And I call it basics because data engineer again is a very big domain. But if you want to go in data science, you only require a few skills of data engineer, right? And mostly data analyst. Then only you try to become a data scientist or a machine learning guy, right? Someone who's using machine learning algorithms. Because unless and until you know the data analyst skills, because unless and until you are not able to analyze the data set or get insights of it, you can't develop a skill of a data scientist, right? Because data scientist has a additional skill from a data analyst, right? But there are a lot of skills which overlap, right? So you first develop skills of a data analyst and basics of data engineering. Then only you switch to data science and machine learning. And deep learning is again a very advanced skill. And you'll see like most of the use cases generally in commercial businesses are solved from machine learning algorithms only. Deep learning is generally little higher and little complex topics. So we generally advise someone who's entering into the domain to first do data analyst, have some data engineering basics. Because a lot of job you will get just based on this. Data analyst or data engineering, there's a lot of job opening. It's just based on this. Data science machine learning is expected from someone who's into the domain for 3 to 5 years. But yes, these days what people are jumping directly to machine learning algorithms without even understanding how to visualize, create data set, do a lot of cleaning, handling missing data set, a lot of dealing with messy data set. People are generally directly learning what is logistic regression, what is SVM, what is neural network. Some people are even directly jumping to deep learning, which is not a way one should learn, right? You have to go from the basics. First, you have to understand what a data analyst does, what exactly crunching of data means, what exactly presenting a data means, how to do that, implementation of that. Then only you can jump to data science machine learning part. Then only you can jump to deep learning and specialization part. And then only you can jump to deployment and infra. Like deployment basically means productionalizing the model. And to be honest, not everyone is expected to know all the skills in this. Like the stages which I have read, not everyone is expected to know all the skills. As a fresher, if you want to go into a data science domain or a data team, you are expected to just know data analyst, right? And the basics of data engineering. I'll also talk about details like what exactly skill set comes under data analysis. I've talked in terms of common words, but I'll also talk about in sets of programming language and what kind of other tech tools do you need. So then only after that skills, if you want to move into terms of machine learning algorithm or something like that, then only you move to data science. Otherwise, even if you can spend 10 years in data analyst, there are roles open for that experience also. Like you can still be in data analyst and still have a good career, right? A BI intelligence guy will have that kind of skills. There are 10 years data analysis experience can go into product analyst. There are requirements for that also. But if you want to jump into data science machine learning, you can do that. It requires a more mathematical understanding. It requires a more algorithmic understanding. So if you have that intuition or if you want to explore that part, that is when it is advisable to move into machine learning and data science. But irrespective of that, you can still have a good career in data analyst, right? And if you have a want to develop more like complex algorithms, then only you jump to deep learning. And if you want to develop a specialization, because a lot of problems you will see today these days are NLP, like text problems, because a lot of data set which generates are text based, right? Someone chatting, someone writing emails, someone's posting some tweets or Instagram images. So CV is computer vision, which deals with images and videos, right? So these specialization requirement has increased because a lot of data these days are being generated in this field, right? So deep learning with specialization in this domain are generally very, very sought out profile. Like if you have this, you can trust me, you can get a very good salary. And nobody expects a 0 to 1 year guy to have this kind of experience. You build over it. Like you move into data analyst, then you learn on the job to become a data science and machine learning, and not only you develop a deep learning specialization in this. It's a long process. You can't do it in 2 months, 3 months. It requires at least a year to have all these three skills, right? And then deployment plus infra. Yeah. So, and deployment at a basic level, you'll need to learn in data science, machine learning level also, and deep learning level also. But deployment as a separate, like someone who's totally into deployment can also have one of a job category. Like there would be data science who's developing models. There would be people who would be developing deep learning models, and then there would be only deployment people who would just be deploying those models. So there are roles in that also that is called either DevOps or machine learning operations, ML ops role, right? So a lot of these roles also depend upon the size of the company, right? If you have a very small data team like of 2 3 people, then the data science guy would also be doing the data analyst, data engineering role, and a deep learning guy would also be doing all the three roles below it, and maybe deployment also. So it totally depends on what size of company you are working with, what size of data team you have. So don't get confused when there is a job posting of deep learning, but is also when you go into the interview, they are expecting you to do a lot of data engineering and data analyst job, because a lot of company defines those roles very individually. Like a deep learning engineer in some company would mean just like building algorithms, but in some company it will even expect you to extract data set, analyze it, build dashboard on top of it also, because whatever results you're building, they want to see that also. So maybe that comes to you because they don't have any data analyst data engineering, because they have a very small data team, like very small startup who is just trying to solve a particular set of problem, right? But whenever you grow, like a company grows little, they would have specific people doing those specific tasks, like a data analyst, data science, deep learning, deployment infra, right? So coming to the skills level, as you understand the data analyst part, so SQL is the basic main tool which generally work with data analysts. So this is basically like analyzing the data set. Programming languages such as Python or R is like kind of can be used anywhere. So I always say people, if you are not already learned R, you should start learning Python, because Python is a lot of more flexibility than R. You can argue a lot. I have seen a lot of blogs people talk about R versus Python, but it doesn't mean much. Like a lot of development is generally like happens in Python domain, and it's a lot of flexible in terms of web development also. So a lot of time you'll be building dashboards also. So Python generally works, right? And then you, as a data analyst, you will be also building dashboards or something. So there are tools like Tableau or Power BI, something which you need to learn. A bit of basic statistics you need to know, because obviously we'll be computing like mean, sum, this kind of statistics, right? So basic of statistics, it is not very difficult. Like if you're even not from a mathematics domain background, you will be able to catch it up, and doesn't require much of a time, right? And how to run experiments, right? Because a data analyst will be running experiments, like analyzing the data set and then getting a result and see what is happening. A bit of machine learning, not very much expected, but something as simple as like regression analysis, which is linear regression, and sometimes a time series modeling, because a lot of data set which generally a data analyst deals with comes as a data like a time series data set, right? So then it is expected, but not, to be honest, like not everywhere like a time series modeling would be happening, or a machine learning regression analysis would have happening and being expected from a data analyst. So I would say analyzing the data set, which is your SQL, programming languages like Python, which is a lot of interacting with, as in coding you'll have to do, building dashboard like Tableau is one of it. There are other Plotly, Dash, Power BI, other things, and basic of statistics and how to run experiments. These are the skills which you need to learn to become a data analyst, right? No data science. I would say like everything which a data analyst know would need to be known by data scientist. Apart from that, machine learning, which is like the main tool of data science, like building algorithms, building models, and then Flask and Docker, which I've written at the bottom, is just deploying those models. As I've said in the previous also, like some data scientists would need to know a bit of deployment. Why? Because they have to represent the models which they have built to someone, right? Like this is how my model is working, my model result is this. They have to deploy it somewhere, either interacting with other piece of the code or just showing it to someone. So they have to deploy it somewhere so that people can see. So that is where a bit of deployment is expected from a data scientist. And if you are in a small company, then a lot of deployment is expected from you. So so that's how I'm talking about different names, but you will realize that a lot of roles and it depends a lot on company's culture and the size of the team also. But at a basic level, if someone is expecting you to be a data scientist, they would expect you to have all the skills the data analyst has, plus machine learning skills, which is again algorithms to build models, and a bit of deployment, right? So data engineering is basically deals if generally when you're working in the cloud environment, so they generally work with everything. So Kafka or RabbitMQ, these are generally tools which is used for capturing and ingesting the data set, and a bit of real-time processing also. Databases is where you store the data set, right? AWS, Google Cloud is generally the Google Cloud provider. Just like you work on your computer, you have the cloud where a lot of analysis, a lot of ingestion, everything which can be done on a computer can be done on the cloud, right? Like so that is the, and most of the data storage apps, everything is on the cloud. So data engineer is expected to be good at that. And engineer is generally expected to be a good software engineer also. Like I don't expect a data science, or nobody expects a data science or data analyst to be a very pro software engineer, right? But a data engineer is expected to be like the code quality, the formatting of the code, the practices, engineering practices. This needs to be very good in data engineer, right? So machine learning engineer, as I talked before, is generally deploying the models which a data scientist has built. So they also deal with a lot of code infrastructure, and they also know a bit of modeling, machine learning models, because they would be generally dealing with the models deployment part. Data engineer is not expected to learn the models because they would be generally the first layer, like ingesting the data set and storing the data set for data analysts to be used. The ML engineer is generally the last stage after the machine learning. So a data scientist has built a model, they would be the one who is going to deploy it, right? And timeline of concepts. So generally, as a fresher, this I have not talked about, like, because if you go ahead and start learning data engineering, this itself will take you 6 months or something like that. But the job is to, if you're entering into the domain, right, like either programming and want to become a data analyst or data scientist or machine learning, and this is the domain which you want to go ahead with. So this is a strategy which you should pick, right? Like learn programming part initially, like give it the time. Why? Because if you don't understand programming, everything else becomes useless, right? So you can't learn machine learning, deep learning, and practice it unless you understand programming, Python, Get API, because a lot of things which you would be doing in machine learning and deep learning would be based on programming. So you need to be good at programming, Python, Get an API. API, why? Because I talked about data engineering basics, right? So a lot of data would be consumed via API, right? That's why you need to have a little bit of understanding of Git and APIs, and plus be good at Python. Take your time, because if you have not, and if you are not good at, or if you're the first time doing, if you're from a non-tech background, if you're not from an IT or computer science background, you give your time to learn Python. If it takes 1 month, it takes 2 months, but generally give it and give a lot of practice. So generally in 2 months, if you are practicing regularly, in 2 months you would be good enough to start moving ahead, right? So once you are able to interact, and with the help of API and other infrastructure, you're able to store the data set. The next part you would be learning is to like handling the data set and visualization. Handling data set basically means like playing with the data set, analyzing it, seeing what data set have, what data set doesn't have, what exactly the data set means, like creating some insights out of it, right? So that is what you need to learn. And visualization is basically creating charts out of it so that any other person can consume the information which you're generating, right? So basically, the popular libraries, which is Pandas and Matplotlib, I think it requires 2 months to learn this and have a good practice. Like if you're good at Python, data handling would not be very much difficult. It's more of these this. So Python would be a little conceptual if you're learning programming for the first time, but the data handling visualization is more of a practice thing, and understand the syntax of Pandas Matplotlib. There's not a much conceptual new content. If you're good at like breaking things in a smaller, like if you're good at logic building, this shouldn't be a big difficult for you, right? Then comes mathematics and statistics. You need to learn this now. Why? Because machine learning depends upon mathematics. Like the algorithms which you are going to learn in machine learning and deep learning depends on the mathematics and statistics. And I know a lot of people get little hesitant, like I have not been a good at mathematics in the past or something. But to be honest, this requires you a kind of basic understanding of mathematics. Like a lot of people even skip it if someone is kind of a doer, like they don't need to go in very deep dive into why this machine learning algorithm is working, what is the cost function of this, why this is not working. If you're not going into deep dive into that, you most people leave this also, the statistics and mathematics, but I would not suggest this to, because if you give 2 months to it, you'll have a good knowledge of mathematics and statistics. And it is, trust me, it is going to be helpful for you in a long term, right? Your understanding of machine learning and deep learning would be much deeper if you understand mathematics and statistics. Like even if you're not from a mathematics background or engineering background, it will not be that difficult for you. It's because it's mostly the basics, like 12th year, like standard 12th mathematics, generally what we deal with in machine learning and deep learning, not complex than that, right? After that is like machine and deep learning basics I've talked about, not deep learning in depth as in becoming a specializing in computer vision or NLP. I've just talked about basics, which is mostly CNN, like neural network, learning about some neural network, how does that flow works, and machine learning algorithms. Generally, it takes like 3-4 months with a lot of projects. So if you learn once like algorithm, a lot of time should go into projects also. Why? Because it's the projects which will show you some real scenarios. Like, because most of the time what I have seen people do is like they go to Kaggle and then they do a lot of practice there. But what happens in Kaggle or something is like most of the data set which you would be dealing with there, it's kind of very cleaned. The data set is very clean and given you in a particular format. But I suggest people, and I'll talk about OneLearn when I talked about my company OneLearn. I will realize that what I do is with my people is like I generally make sure that they work and then they collect the data set on their own. Like go through an API and get some messy data set from Twitter or from Google Images, collect some images from the Google, and then build your models on top of it. Why? Because when you go in a company, right? If I go and join a company called Flipkart, and Flipkart is just starting right now, they would I'll nobody's going to come and give me like, okay, Rehan, this is your data set and build a machine learning recommendation engine on top of it. It would be my job as a data scientist or something to ask the data engineers that you should collect this certain category of data set, because I, as a machine data scientist, would know like this is the data set which is required for me to build a particular model. So it would be my job to define the scope. Like these are the data set which I need to build that model. Nobody is going to give me those data set pre-handed to me like in a very clean CSV Excel file and then say, okay, build your model. That is a good to learn concept, I would say. Like just practicing your machine learning algorithms or concepts is good for you. But you have to realize that nobody gives you lakhs, nobody's paying you 10 lakhs or 20 lakhs just to write those model lines, right? Like building linear regression. There's 5 lines of code if you're using scikit-learn or something. Nobody's going to pay you 10 lakhs just because you're able to write a model. Model writing is just a very, very basic part of building a machine learning project. It's getting the data set, what data set you need to define. These are the things which plays a big role as a when you go into this domain, right? And then deployment part, not very difficult, but you'll realize that some deployment may be very near real time. You have to build some deployment, maybe running a batch processing. So it takes a time. Like give it a 1 month, and if you have developed your programming, your data handling visualization part as part of your mathematics and basics in your machine learning model, you'll get it up. Like 1 month is a good amount of time to have a practice also on a lot of models. And different scenarios, like some deployment maybe via API, some deployment maybe via cloud services directly. Okay. See, and the point is like this is a 1 year, almost a year concept, right? You don't have to be good at everything in the first year, right? Like you need to understand the basic concepts. You need to have a hands-on practice. You need to have a project with you to showcase to wherever you're applying for a job. But don't try to be a master in just the first year, because it never happens that way. Learning is a process, right? Build your concept, build your projects, and then over the time you start building expertise in something like 2 years, 3 years down the line, running multiple projects, debugging a lot of machine learning algorithms, debugging a lot of machine learning projects. That's where you learn most of the things. Okay, as I mentioned, right, these roles and skills sets overlaps depending upon company size and culture. Like somewhere data analyst and data engineering would be the same person. Somewhere machine learning and deep learning engineers would be the same person. Any questions till now? Okay, I'll look it. So after I'll talk about OneLearn right now, and then after that I'll cover the questions which you guys have put it here. Okay. So coming back to my company, like OneLearn.io, right? So see, the whole agenda of giving this session was like I have seen a lot of people when I interact uh, as a company. I'll talk about what OneLearn is, but when I interact with a lot of people who are trying to come into this room, and I've realized that people first of all don't understand what data science is, what kind of roles are inside that domain, what is kind of expectation, and what is the learning process that you should go through. Like because people feel like, okay, like within 1 month can I be a data scientist? Within like 60 days, someone promises me that you can learn all the data science. It doesn't work that way, right? It's because you'll have to realize that while you can just consume videos and videos and videos You can go ahead and YouTube. It's good for one-time learning, but unless and until you get your hands dirty, unless and until you give enough time to practice to deal with a lot of different scenarios, right? Like if you learn pandas visualization work that like this way, but if sometimes a different data set works with you or different scenarios comes with, and you have to create a different kind of visualization, you'll not be able to do that unless you have been a lot of practice. Like why do you think after 3 years, 4 years, people get a very good salary, right? Like it's because they have a good hands-on experience, and that is what will differentiate you from the people who are applying for the job currently. Like if someone is applying for the job, most of the time I have seen resumes. Like in my previous company called Renew Power, I used to hire a lot of people. Like I built a data science team there, but what was the issue there is like a lot of people would come and say that I've done this kind of machine learning algorithms. Someone would say like I've built a face app detector, like something image detector or something like face. But when you go a little deep into it, like what was the purpose of building it? What was the end-to-end flow which you have done? What is the model versioning which you have? What happens if your model is not working, right? What was your rollout strategy? Like you have built a particular model, and you are saying you have built a model, but you haven't even talked about like how would you publish it to the people, like right? Like if I as a product has a 1 million user, and you as a data scientist has built some model, I want a strategy like how should I publish those your model to like my 1 million users, like, and how will you be evaluating the metrics? Like if the model is not working, like suppose it was working for 1 week, but after the 1 week it's not working, what is your strategy then, right? So these kind of real world scenarios nobody knows, right? And most of the time what people has done is like just gone through a same tutorial. Like half of the time, 90% of the time, I would say like most of the people shows me Titanic data set, like they have done some work on it. Trust me, if someone shows that on the project, like no, I know that they have not gone into depth of it. That is what the understanding. Like 5 years back, if someone used to do like Kaggle and something, that was the time when Kaggle was very popular, right? Like it was a place where someone can go and practice. But now it has become a like everyone is doing that. That is the point. Like I'm trying to say, like everyone is doing the same assignments, the same projects, and submitting their resumes. Like if I post one job of data science, I would get 500 resumes within 2 days. That is the thing which is happening right now. And out of those 500 resumes, trust me, there would be hardly 10 to 20 people who would be worth interviewing. The rest of most of the thing would have the same projects, nothing to showcase, like little documentation, and the resumes would not be in the right format. A lot of scenarios. Like I'm talking to the real scenarios. And I've seen people has come from different courses they have done, spend a year on it, but then again, it was always one way interactive. They have gone through a lot of video session, like it was recorded sessions, live session, but they've gone through videos and videos, and they haven't put things into practice. There was no mentorship or something like that which would have given critiques like, okay, this is the way you have solved a problem, but this is a better way to solve the problem. But you have missed this scenario. Give a question back to them like, okay, I've done in this way, but what would be your way to solve that particular set of problem? So that critique, that like brainstorming, which generally happens in a company, that is missing with the people who's applying to a data science job these days. Like so, so what is the current learning process? That this is what exactly means, right? Like online videos, one-way learning for you are just consuming, but there is no brainstorming happening. You're doing tutorials without any feedback. Like you don't even know that what you have done is the right way or not, whether this is what was expected as an answer, right? Like, or most of the times people just copy the code from some Stack Overflow and some other GitHub repository and write there as their own code. But when you go in depth, like why have written this particular line of the code? What is the purpose of this line of code? Most of the time, people don't know. Like, see, it's not that you should not copy code from Stack Overflow. People like I also have 9 years of experience. Even after till today, there are some syntax or something which I go ahead and copy from there. Right? That is expected from us. Even if senior data scientists will do that. But conceptually, you should be very clear. Like, what is you're doing? Like syntax, nobody, I don't expect you to remember all the Panda syntax, all the Python syntax. It comes with practice, but I don't expect you to remember each and one of the things. Like you can go ahead and look at your documentation, copy it. You can go ahead and look at like say Stack Overflow and copy it. But conceptually, you should be clear like what exactly you're trying to do. And it can't happen unless you have a good study group. I would say either you have made your own study group, or you're in a scenario like what used to be like how college learning or how you used to learn in 10th and 12th, right? You would have a study group, a small study group, and you would have questions, discussions, talk, asking teachers a lot. But that is totally missing, I see right now in the learning projects right now, learning process, right? And even the sample projects which you're doing, right? No correlation to the real world scenarios, right? Like most of the projects would be like the same as I mentioned, right? The Titanic project is too common, very common. Like linear regression is what I get. Like people have 6 lines of code to do a linear regression. And see, my point is like I wouldn't hire spending like 5 lakhs to 10 lakhs. I wouldn't be spending that amount of money and hire someone who just are able to write like 5 lines of code without even understanding what is linear regression doing. What will happen if the linear regression is not fitting the curve? What would you do then? Like these kind of real scenarios people don't think about. But that is what, if I give you a project in a real world, right? If I'm working with a real data set, I'm working with a client, that is what scenarios would develop. Like if you have worked with a linear regression and your line would not be fitting, right? And but you have not explored that scenario, right? It would be like, okay, the data set which you have worked earlier would be like the problem station would be fit a linear regression there, and you would fit a linear regression and it would work that way. The game ends. But that is not what generally happens. Like you try linear regression, it doesn't work. You try another thing. You try play with the data set. You see why this is not happening. You transform the data set into log transformation or any other thing, and then use another algorithm. So I'm just saying, like these failures, like what to do when you fail, when you expected an algorithm to work. So that is what is missing, and the feedback, right? So that is what is missing. So the reason I started OneLearn.io, right? Me and my co-founder Arunesh, he didn't. We started this OneLearn.io is to exactly fill this gap, right? So what we're doing is like our learning process. What we do is like we do a personalized live sessions, right? And I'll share some videos. Like you'll see a lot of interaction happens. Like while even solving, explaining some assignments, there would be a lot of interaction happening between the students and us. Like you'll be asking a lot of questions, like why this is working. I will give a different scenario and ask you like, can you answer me in the session or not? Like someone would be answering like that in the session, like how it used to happen in the your school days, right? Your teacher would put it on the blackboard and ask like one of the student to answer it, and that is what is missing in this. Is like those interaction, two interaction is not happening. So that is what we are trying to do, like those personalized interaction, project based learning, like actually working with the startups, getting the project from there, and then asking user to solve it, because the data set which you work with should not be clean. That is the purpose. Like if it's clean data set, you're not learning anything. You're just replicating the same code what 10 other people are doing, like 1,000 other people are doing. You're just replicating the same code, like 5 lines of linear regression, 10 lines of random forest, and you're just done. That doesn't prove you different. Your resume doesn't becomes different from other people, right? So that is what we are trying to solve to give project based learning. And the other thing is like unlimited dot sessions, right? Like asking questions, like, okay, this is I didn't understand. Can we have one more session on top of on it? So these kind of goes with the personalized live session. The unlimited dot session should always be there. Like otherwise, the session would keep on going again. If you're not resolving your dots, you'll lag behind, right? You'll stay behind. So that is what we're trying to solve with the unlimited dot sessions, personalized live sessions, project based learning, like with working with the real scenarios of data set, and at the end guaranteeing a job, right? So our main agenda of seeing like and I personally hate certifications, right? What happens is like people go for online certifications, get an online certification, but come back and is still searching for the job, right? Why? Because there's no accountability on a lot of like people, companies who provide certification. Like there is no accountability at the end of them, like to give you a job or try to get your job, because there is no trust on their learning process. They also know that their learning process is not so robust that people graduating from me would be guaranteed a job, right? But we know, like we have done in the past also, like this is not the first time we're doing this. We have done in the past also, like where we have proved like the learning process delivers a job, right? 100% delivers. Like the people has come to us like with even 4 years experience, like 2017 to 2021, they haven't worked. Like he was preparing for UPSC or something. Then they also have even moved into a data science job after going through this process. Technically a data analyst job right now, but that is what you enter first as a fresher, right? So, so that is the reason we are able to guarantee a job. Like, and I'll show you how also. See, as a one learn, there are two sets we are working with, right? One is the hiring companies and partners need, like the companies which needs to hire. What has happened? What is their issue? Like, what is their issue? So their issue is like they want to hire people, but they don't get a skill. They get 500 resumes, out of that only 10 people are skilled. So that is the problem, and they waste a lot of their engineers' time, like the data scientists at their own company taking interviews of people who are not even qualified enough, right? People, candidates doesn't understand end-to-end project lifecycle. Why? Because they have done one tutorial which just talks about like implementing that particular 5 lines of linear regression or 10 lines of random forest, right? They don't have a good soft skill. They're not able to present themselves, like explaining the project, because that is also important. Like as a data scientist, you have to explain your projects. As a data analyst, you have to explain your projects, whatever the insights, whatever the prediction. If you can't just say like my model is like 99% accurate, man, how did you arrive to that? What was your assumptions? How can you guarantee that this like accuracy would remain? If doesn't remain this accuracy, what are you going to do? You have to present this to someone at a higher up, because at the end you're working in an office, right? You're not working solo. So these kind of skills needs to be developed, like, right? Understanding pros and cons of any technical method which you're using. If you're using linear regression, what is the cons of it? Where it shouldn't work. So you need to develop those concepts to that, right? And what does student need, right? Like they need hands-on practice, dot clearance, access to companies to apply for job. I've seen this is one more topic, right? I've seen like a lot of people, even good candidates, right? They are not able to apply and get an interview. Why? Because there are so many people applying, and they don't have access to companies, right? Because most of the jobs generally happen either by referrals or people will post it somewhere which you'll not be able to get good access to, right? So these things are totally missing in the market. So what we are doing is like we're connecting those students, like the one who goes through us and learn through us, through our learning process. And then we have partnered with a lot of companies, right? Like which has this certain requirement. So we fulfill these particular set of requirements so that their life becomes easy in terms of hiring. Because trust me, like the biggest problem companies are facing these days, like you go on Twitter and search anywhere, go on LinkedIn and search any CEO's dilemma. The biggest problem they face is like hiring good candidates. I'm not talking about hiring candidates, hiring good candidates. That is their biggest dilemma. And a company's success totally depends on good candidates. So that is the biggest problem we are trying to solve for them. Like we have started with data science and have gone through iterations of it. But our agenda of London is like to become a alternate school or alternate learning platform where people can just upskill themselves and not just upskill. We coined the term job skill, like get a job at the end of those skilling. Otherwise, you can upskill on, learn something on, you can on YouTube also, but to be prepared in a really exactly how a job is, like simulate real jobs, be prepared for actually what is going to happen in the company. That doesn't happen generally. You don't get those opportunities unless and until you have good mentors, someone who's in this industry or someone who has been there, done that. So that is what we are doing. And so this session was just to educate you in terms of like what exactly data science means, what exactly the roles are expected in it, so that if you decide to choose and if you decide to follow a learning process, you can make a right choice, right? So as part of the job guarantee, which I was mentioning here, what we give as the job guarantee is like, so there's a 100% guarantee job. That is what we perform. And like the salary we guarantee in terms of like 5 to 35 lakhs per annum, right? And there's a kind of legal agreement which happens like between me and our company and the student, which is basically mentions that if the person is not placed in the guaranteed period, they get a full tuition fee back plus 50K extra. The 50K extra is because we have gone through the process and everything. We know that this is never going to happen. Like unless and until, of course, there's the conditions, right? The condition basically is like you have to put effort, right? If you are join the learning process, but you're not doing anything, you're not attending any sessions, you're not doing any process, then of course, there's no way we can guarantee in that scenario, right? It has to be a two-way effort. So we put our effort, we expect also the people who has come to us to put that effort, right? So again, I'll go through the questions which you have mentioned, and I think you can add more of your questions. I'll just give a brief description again for the people who have joined late. So as I mentioned, I'm Rohan Asif, co-founder of OneLearn.io, and like IT Guwahati alumni, 9+ years experience. And you can look on the website also, OneLearn.io, and you'll get more details about the company, what we are trying to do. And you can also look up my LinkedIn and you just search by my name. get my LinkedIn. Connect with me there. Even if you don't want to join one, then we can just discuss. We'll have a lot of sessions. Like I will be conducting free sessions also on introductory data analytics course, talking about free learnings on Python, pandas, and visualization, everything. I will be regularly conducting those free sessions. So even then, you can connect on LinkedIn, and we can go through that process also. Okay. So now I'll go back to the questions. You can ask more questions if you haven't asked now. Yeah, so the first question I can see is what basic skills are mostly examined in the technical round interview, plus scope of getting a role of remote data scientist analyst as a fresher overseas. So yeah, there's definitely a scope of getting a role of remote data scientist and analyst. That definitely happens. The only issue here generally is like you might have to work as a freelancer if the company which is offering a remote data science job doesn't have a registered company in that particular country. Like suppose if someone from US wants to hire from India, they need to have a subsidiary in India. There are other companies called remote.com through which they can hire, but they can't legally directly hire unless they have a subsidiary here. So they generally hire as a freelancer or something, as a contractor or freelancer. They don't hire as their own employee. So that is obviously possible. You can get a role of remote data science. What are basic skills are mostly examined in the technical round and interview? So depends again on the job you're applying for. If you're applying for a data analyst, then trust me, SQL is very, very important. Learn that. Learn your programming basics. So these two are basics. If you're applying for machine learning model, then they would expect you to explain one of the models like by heart, like what are the different scenarios you have done, what are the different situations you have gone through a machine learning model, and why have you picked up those particular models, right? Why have you not gone through other models? Like there are 10 models to apply for. Why have picked one models? Why it is working? Why it is not working? How are you evaluating the metrics? So these kind of questions would come, right? And I think I'll have specific sessions on this also in coming up. Join me on LinkedIn, and I'll keep posting it. Like what exactly interviews are made up of. Like what are the skills or what are the topics of discussion generally in the interview are, and how you should prepare for the interview. But generally, again, it generally depends on your role which you have written, applying for, and what are the projects which you have written in your resume, right? Yeah, as a fresher, what is the role I should target to get into the company? Data analyst. The data analyst is the first thing you should learn, and you should try it at to get into the company. Don't jump directly into data science and machine learning. First, do the data analyst, start applying, and parallelly start learning your data science and machine learning part. Okay. I use R for analysis. Is it necessary for me to learn Python as well for data science? If yes, then what is the base source to learn? Of course, as a bias, I would say my one learns resource to learn. But yeah, there are a lot of free courses. You can just pick anything on YouTube also and just start practicing. Just start practicing. There is no other way you can learn just watching videos. It says just start practicing Python problems. R is good, but I still suggest let go into Python because this will help you in a longer term. R is also good. A lot of consulting companies generally use R, but if you're trying to go into product companies or there, you'll realize that most of your other team members are using Python. So generally, it becomes difficult if other team member is using Python and you are using R. So I would suggest learn Python. Not very difficult if you're R. If you already know R, Python would not be very difficult. It's a very verbose language. Like the way you talk generally is the way you write coding language. Also in this scenario, so learn it. Any YouTube video. If you need any specific suggestion, you can just ping me. And I think if you go on onelearn.io also, there is a free trial, which is an introductory data analytics course, where we have taught Python also. Where there is a quizzes assignments also. You can go ahead and that is a free resource. You can go and learn from there also. Okay. As the Python information with info about basic ML concepts like regression methods, Zarima. So I believe that you have time series understanding, then you have linear regression understanding, and other regression models. So I would say do projects end to end, like understand how model data extraction generally was data transformation, and then uh, say data model versioning, how to deploy those models. It's good that you know regression methods. I would say, of course, classification is also one of the methods you should get it hands on, learn classification methods, but do end to end project lifecycle deployment specifically. Either deploy it as a Flask API or deploy it on Heroku, or use some visualization called Streamlit or something like that as a library and tool. And then the whole point being showcase your work, like whatever you've learned, try to showcase it. That is what you can put it on your resume. Like concepts is okay, like it's good you have the concept, but you have to show the proof of work, like you have done some work. And that is the only way any interviewer or any someone as a recruiter would shortlist your profile, right? I come from a non-tech background. Is data science a good choice for me? Yes, definitely. Why I'd say that? Because see, programming is like a soft skill these days. Like even if you're from a non-tech background, you can learn. If you give time, like 2 months or something, you'll start learning the programming. The conceptual part here only comes in terms of machine learning algorithms. Otherwise, it's more of a practice. So I have seen like a couple of my students were from economics background. They went into data science and they're doing good right now. Some people were from uh, did a biotechnology or uh, was in radiology, I think. They are doing data science and is in the domain right now, right? I see a lot of certification courses. I'm getting a little confused on which one will benefit. So as I mentioned that I have a little issue with certification courses. Don't go just on certification. Make sure that the place we're going, as I mentioned about one learn also, the place we are going gives you something in back also. Either the learning process is that good or you're getting a job at the end. There should be some output because you're going to put a lot of money on it, right? Like certification is good. Like if you at the end if you have the certification only but you don't have the skill set, if you don't have the enough practice, you'll not be able to pass the interviews because most of the data scientists taking the interviews would realize that it's just a certification without any depth into it. So go for the depth, go for the learning process, as I mentioned, like practice. Only learn by doing is going to get you a job. And practice with messy data sets, I would say. Like don't use just plain vanilla data set which every other 90% of the people are using. Okay. I don't have a required qualification, that is degree, master, PhD. Am I still qualified to be the data scientist? See, when you mention degree, I assume you're not even having a bachelor's degree. Okay. So ideally, in a ideal scenario, and I think which we are as a one learn, we are also targeting that people, irrespective of their degree, can get a job within with data science. But I would say right now that's not the scenario. People expect you to have at least a bachelor's degree. It's unfortunate, but that is the truth. Like people at least expect you to have a bachelor's degree, and I hope we can, and we will be able to change that. Like even irrespective of degree or irrespective of any academic qualification, because the point is like every resources on the internet is very awesome. Like not only my resources, most of the resources on the internet are very good. Like if you want, you can learn anything. Like if you want to be a front end developer, you can go and learn anything. If you want to be economist, you can go and learn anything on the internet. So these degrees would become obsolete in a coming years, but not right now. I would say. Like it's difficult to be honest to get a job without any degree. Can you share the presentation PPT? Sure, I'll share the presentation PPT, and if possible, I will also try to share the recording of the session. Any other questions? Anyone would like to add? So, is having SQL, Python, and Tableau skills enough? Yes, yes. If you have this skill set, and if you have good projects to show, because at the end, skills is one thing. Like, but you have to showcase your skills, right? Build a dashboard, use some data set, show those analysis, like make your dashboard live, deploy it somewhere, either deploy it on Heroku app or something, but deploy it. Show your skill set. Otherwise, it's very difficult. Okay, but it is the skill set which you have mentioned, like SQL, Python, and Tableau. These are good enough skill set to get into the domain as data analyst. Any other questions? Okay, so if there is no other questions, then I will end the session. Okay, and I will share the PPT also to you with the recordings. Okay. Okay then. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye, and hope you we connect on LinkedIn or somewhere. Okay. Thanks.